All right, we still have a few people joining, so I'm going to give it one more minute before we get started. But to everyone here, I just want to say thank you for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We appreciate you taking the time to join us to this webinar. With me, I have Shmuel Gihon, who is our security research team lead. He's been on the CyberInt team for how long, Shmuel? It's been 3 years.
It's been
Is that correct?
almost 2 years. Yeah.
Almost 2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
2 years, excellent. And has been in the cybersecurity threat intelligence space for much longer than that. So he will bring some excellent insights to the table for us today as we review ransomware events and trends from 2022. And just a few housekeeping notes before we dive in. The webinar is being recorded, just to let everyone know. And we will share a recording afterwards if you'd like to share it with your colleagues or watch through it again. And additionally, feel free to ask questions at any point throughout the webinar. We'll try to address them as they come up, but we also have some time dedicated towards the end to answer any questions that come up. All right, so I think that we can go ahead and get started. Thanks once again to everyone for joining. We're really excited to be starting off. This is our first webinar this year. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. Shmuel, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Okay. So we want to, basically this webinar, as Daniel already said, it's going to be a recap of all the ransomware industry and the main events that we found important throughout 2022. We're going to talk about some statistics of 2022, about the major events in the cybercrime and the ransomware industry in general. We're going to talk about something we call bad for business, which is pretty much the involvement of threat groups and cybercrime groups in politics. You can't have ransomware webinar without talking about Lockbit, of course, the #1 ransomware gang currently. We're going to talk about a little bit of newcomers, rookie of the year if you want, and we're going to conclude with a little bit of recommendations about what we can do in order to prevent ourselves from suffering from a major ransomware attack. So if we're talking about the ransomware stats, 2022, I must say, has been an interesting year. As you can see, we had from 2020 to 2021, we had a 105% increase in ransomware cases, pretty much double the cases. And this success, quote unquote, of the ransomware industry, they couldn't make it happen again in 2022. And this is the question that we had to understand a little bit why and what are the things that led to it. So as we continue to look at the stats, we can see that the quarters of 2022 was pretty interesting because the Q1 and Q2 started really strong for the ransomware industry, especially Q1, because Q1 was pre-Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Russia-Ukraine conflict was a bit of a turning point in the cyber crime industry in general, but also in the ransomware industry. So Q3 and Q4 was that we had a little bit of decline, and we can see it also by the ransom paid by victims. So we look at the research that Chain Analysis did on what is the decline in a matter of percentage of the ransom paid to ransomware groups by victims. So if you see on 2021, we have $766 million paid in ransom, and we see 40% decline. So we had to ask ourselves what this decline come from, and it's not like ransomware groups stopped their actions, right? I mean, it's pretty much the same amount of victims. So what led to the decline itself? So in our opinion, in my opinion at least, when we talk about the decline, we try to understand what led to it. So what we think is that it's a combination of a lot of elements, right? So the first element that we thought about is basically better tech, better defense, maybe, and it seems like companies starting to prioritize ransomware and defenses against ransomware better. So it puts the ransomware groups in a position where there is a chance that they have been able to compromise a company, they have been able to encrypt and steal valuable data, but not that valuable, right? So when a company is doing a negotiation with a ransomware group, they tend to ask for proof, they tend to ask for files that you might have, and sometimes they don't have something that is significant. So a lot of the times the victims say, okay, I won't pay, just publish whatever you can because it's not that significant. I don't mind. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but I don't mind that it will be out. So this is one thing. The second thing, I think that it's a pretty interesting point of view to look at the situation is the fact that you have some regulations in some countries regarding paying ransom, right? I think that Daniel knows about it way better than I do, but the idea is that you can't, at some countries, especially the States, there is regulation against paying. So as a CISO, as a company, you're not allowed to pay the ransom. So I think that there is a chance that a lot of companies just choose not to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think a lot of organizations are concerned about exposing themselves to some kind of liabilities if they do pay a ransom to a threat actor group that's sanctioned. So I do think that that's a contributing factor here. But it's actually really interesting what you said, that in some ways these stats are a little bit encouraging. Ransomware over the course of 2022, we saw a slight decline and a large decline in the amount of money that was being paid to ransomware groups. So maybe this indicates that people have better backup and disaster recovery solutions. They're doing a better job of being able to recover if they are hit with ransomware without needing to actually pay the bad guys. So
Yeah.
a bit of good news there, I think.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it's still a lot. It's still a lot, right? But anyway, it's way better than it used to be. So if we want to talk about the top targeted nations, of course, that there is no doubt that the United States is the most targeted one. It's the land of opportunities also for ransomware attacks. So I guess that they're the number one state that is being targeted at the moment. It's not something new. It's been the same in 2021, 2022. There is a change between 21 and 22 when Japan got into the top 10 most targeted countries, which is a bit of interesting point, but not something that interesting as the last point that Russia climbed into the top 10. So for those of you who doesn't know, Russia being targeted by ransomware attacks is something that is very unlikely. It used to be something that is almost taboo, if you like. No one messed with Russia. It's not just because of the fact that they're scared of them, but a lot of the ransomware groups that are actually active based in Russia or Russia region at least. So, I mean, it's kind of a, let's say, win-win situation when a ransomware group thrive and the Russian government might get a piece of that. Then maybe there is no any real interest to target Russia. So the fact that Russia got into the top 10 led us to question how, why. So we think that following the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and because of the fact that a lot of groups and cybercrime groups took sides and supported Ukraine, it's needless to say that Russia will be targeted. So a lot of cybercrime groups that kind of converted to ransomware groups probably attacked Russia as an act of half financial motivation and hacktivism motivation, hacktivism in general, stuff like that, right? So this is this is a really important stat to see, because when it comes to let's say commodity cybercrime victims, Russia would never be there, especially not in the top 10. So we also wanted to take a look at the top 10 ransomware groups and basically who leads this industry. So we have seen that out of the top 10 ransomware groups, 41% of the cases are Lockbit, right? So you can see pretty much clearly that Lockbit has taken over the industry ever since Conti disappearance, ever since the Conti leaks incident that happened in the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And it became the most dominant group. They managed themselves amazing. And there are new ransomware groups that have been, that came along the way, like Blackbuster, you can see Beyond Lian, Royal. All those groups also added value and added victims and took a place of a solid group, but none came close to Lockbit, not even Blackbuster, not even Hive, Carrefour, none of them. And okay, so this is another stats that we wanted to see, like what are the performance of these groups throughout 2021 and 2022. So you can see that Lockbit almost doubled their victims. This is why we say that they pretty much took over the industry. They doubled their victims. Conti dropped down significantly because they eventually died in mid 2022. REvil, Paisa, and Abaddon pretty much disappeared. REvil, it's pretty much obvious because of the arrest. Paisa and Abaddon is a bit of a mystery because we haven't seen them. I haven't heard about them a lot, if any, in 2022, and we don't know of any significant case that should have led to that. It might be because they're rebranded to something else, or they're just disbanded and the members joined other groups. But as a group, they're not the same. But the ones that took over their place, so you can see by the victim count that Blackbuster, Caracal, Hive, and even Vice pretty much deliver the same numbers. So they are the mid-scale, the solid players of this industry. So you can see that three groups pretty much disappeared, but 3 others took their place perfectly, but none of them could have matched, let's say, Conti of 2021, right? This is something that will take time. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to talk about is the major events in the world of the cybercrime, and more particularly in the ransomware industry. So in 2021, the first thing is the REvil member arrest, right? So in the beginning of the year, REvil, to those of you who doesn't know, REvil was one of the greatest ransomware groups on 2021, 2020. They used to be a really big game hunters. They used to be notorious ransomware group that terrorized a lot of organizations. And in early 2022, several REvil members, and when I say members, I mean operators and affiliates, so people that worked with the group and people that ran the group, basically, they got arrested by the Russian government. Now, a lot of the people say that this arrest was long overdue. A lot of people say that this arrest was already, they arrested like a dead group already. So these people the group was pretty much dying in these days. And it was kind of an arrest in purpose of PR purposes. It wasn't because the Russian government wanted to make the world better and fight cybercrime or fight ransomware industry. It's not something like that. So the damage, the group itself, they disappeared for a couple of months. After that, they came back, but they came back as something that is not the REvil we used to know, unfortunately, by the way. But they claimed only 11 victims in 2022, which is really low number comparing to the 100 and something they did on 21, or even more they did on 2020.
So do you
Yeah.
suspect that the REvil of 2022 is the same members and operators that existed in 2020 and 2021? Or do you think perhaps it's some up and coming threat actors that just wanted to use that name because it had some kind of a notorious reputation behind it?
Yeah, so it's a question that a lot of people ask about any group that disappears and come back at some point, right? Even if they come back as a rebrand name, it's something else, or if they come back as their own name. It's kind of hard to say, but we do know that several affiliates, people contractors that work with the group that was really talented, got arrested. And we believe that maybe they're the ones that didn't got released, or they're the ones that didn't get away with that. So our evil lost a lot of their powers, even if this the same operators, their talents, quote unquote, the talents themselves are not there anymore. Or maybe they went and joined like Lockbit or other group that basically just offer them more money. So, but one thing is, the question is if it's the same operators, we're not sure, but it's not the same affiliates, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you.
That's probably the main event of 2022, the Conti leaks. So Conti was the number one group in the ransomware industry in 2021. They pretty much claimed tons of victims. Everyone feared them. They even, at some point, they even got control, and they threatened magazines that published articles that they didn't like. So they had a lot of power throughout 2021, sorry. And after the Russia-Ukraine conflict began, we see an interesting phenomenon where a lot of groups took sides, as I already said. And Conti decided to side with Russia because a lot of the operators and a lot of the affiliates of Conti was Russian. So what they didn't know is that one of the members or former member or whatever, there are a lot of speculation about who this guy is, didn't like that, of course, and he was able to compromise or leak pretty much every single byte that Conti owned, and every single thing that they ever wrote, every chat, every piece of software they had, even you could see even like faces, pictures of people. He leaked everything, every shred of information the group had and collected in the past 2 years. So this event is something that is rare in the cybercrime industry, especially if we're talking about skilled group as Conti. So this has pretty much led to the group disappearing again. They did try to come back at some point, but you could see that something is totally. We at CyberInt wrote a specific report just on how the group was built based on the leaks. So, and you could see the figures there. You could see the authority of the leaders. You could see the authority of the managers there, and you could see that exactly. You could see that there is a whole structure they actually built as an organization. They had 300 members, right? And they had the finance, they had the business development, R&D, HR, affiliates. They actually had a working organization that made close to $3 billion in 2-3 years. I mean, a lot of companies, legitimate companies, don't get to do that. Tech companies don't get to have that, right? And you could see that after they came back, like it was a couple of months, after they came back, you could see that this is not the same group. This is not the same leaders. They manage themselves really poorly. Even I don't want to piss anyone off, but even a little bit of immature, and you could see that they're not calculating the next steps. They're just doing stuff without thinking. They're reacting without thinking. So
would you say previously the leaders were experienced and strategic and more mature?
I think that their decision, fortunately for us, of course, right? But I think that their decision to take sides was a result of their emotions taking over, right? So this is not something that is very professional in a way, but reading the conversation of the people and reading the conversation between each other, the leaked conversation between each other, you could see that the leaders they had like a real authority. They were actual leaders, right? You can see that they're more mature. You can see that they're talking about people fear them, like stuff like that. They even threaten each other sometimes, because if I'm in higher priority than you are, if I'm your like if there's a red team and I'm the team lead of the red team, then you can see that they're actually threatening each other. Then you won't get paid if you don't do this and that. So they had the power to do this thing. They had the power to rule the group, but somewhere along the way, after the leak went real south for the members, I believe that most of the leaders just disband, laying low for a while, and maybe we'll come back. Like the real leaders will come back eventually. The second one is something that happened on 2023, although we thought that it's very important to mention it also. So in January last month, law authorities and law agencies from around the world took down the Hive ransomware group website, Onion website. And it was a joint effort of a lot of agencies. It was an undercover operation that lasted for around several months. It was a real effort, let's put it this way. It was a real effort for the FBI, kind of a win, I guess. The FBI worked with several agencies, as I already said. And before I get to the main point of this event, I just want to throw something, because this event was like highly, I wouldn't say televised, but it was in mainstream media and stuff like that. So Hive was the 6th most active ransomware group in 2022. They estimate they collected around 100 million. It's something that is pretty hard to assess, but it was around $100 million in ransom. They were the 6th, and out of, I don't know, around 50 or 60 active groups at the moment. So this is kind of, I don't want to make this event small. It's a big one, but we still have a lot to do when it comes to the ransomware industry, and we still have a lot to achieve when we talk about the ransomware industry. And the main point to take here is that although it's a big win for us, no arrests were made. So basically the members are still free, and they took down a lot of valuable information, and they took down their servers. That's true, but servers are way easier to replace than people, especially if we talk about talented people. So more of those, of course, but it's just kind of put things into perspective. That's all. The second point that this point, if we want to talk about, is the bad for business point. It's the phenomenon that I talked about earlier, the fact that groups are taking sides, being more political, doing ransomware and hacktivism, stuff like that. So we just took 2 examples out of many. We had the Coming Project. It was a French threat actor group. It used to be a lot of data leakage group, and maybe a little bit of ransomware here and there, nothing too serious. It supported Russia. When the conflict began, and the fact that they chose to get involved in politics, they drew the attention of other threat group that named Against the West. We had a whole saga on this one also, but it attracted the attention of Against the West, which were a data leakage group also that supported Ukraine. And those 2 groups, Against the West, actually was able to compromise Coming Project's servers and leak all the information to the French authorities. So the people in Coming Project, this is a great example for the fact that people from Coming Project actually got arrested. It wasn't just the servers, the people actually got arrested. So that's a good one, I guess. And we had the Belarusian cyber partisans, which are the group that pretty much, let's say, they're the first ones, or one of the first, that claimed ransomware, political ransomware. So the group was able to compromise the Belarusian railway systems, which supplied ammo, tanks, vehicles, machinery, whatever, to the Ukrainian border, and it was pretty much used by the Russian government. So once they were able to compromise these systems, they halted the whole activity of this railway, which led to significant slow in the operations that the Russian government wanted to take in the Russian border. They demanded like release of political prisoners, and even after several weeks after the conflict, they still claim that they have a hold in this system. They still claim that they're disrupting the activity as much as they can, because this is all they have pretty much.
This one's really fascinating to me because I think, broadly speaking, ransomware is almost always financially motivated, like, 99.9% of the time. So here we have a case where it was sort of a hacktivism incident, and the ransom was actually a political objective. So is this something that you think you will become more common? Is this something that you expect to see more headed into the future?
I think that if let's put it this way, I think that if the Russia-Ukraine conflict will continue, or there will be other conflict in that scale, let's say a conflict within China's region or something like that, I think we will see more and more people joining this type of campaigns. Yeah, because eventually, it's also a matter of the generation that the people are at, their age, who they, if this thing is close to them, if not, so stuff like that. Because of the Russia region is the region that is pretty much known for a lot of talented threat researchers and cybercrime individuals, of course, then it was a bit more predictable that they will join it in a way, but we haven't thought that they would go this far,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Lockbit 3.0. Yeah. So as I said, you can't have a webinar about ransomware without talking about Lockbit. So Lockbit is, of course, everyone knows them. They're the #1 group at the moment. They pretty much are the ransomware industry. And I think that they manage themselves amazing, to be honest, and they're at this point where they can do stuff like we see right here. They can focus on PR instead of being of hiding instead of keeping their anonymity. They're just going all out, and they enjoying the ride pretty much. So we can see that they've launched a tattoo campaign. They offered like $1,000 for whoever that will do a Lockbit tattoo. A lot of people did. Surprisingly enough, a lot of people did. So it got to the point where Lockbit had to close the giveaway because it was like too many people. Some people already did the tattoos and didn't get paid. So yeah. They didn't lose too many followers. I mean, they still have a lot of people that, I don't know, I guess believe in their cause or whatever. I'm not sure about that, but they still it's something that is still a lot of people talk about, and they're still in the mainstream. Of course, they're doing a great job of PR and stuff like that. So
yeah, and in contrast to a group like Conti, for example, which was one of the top groups in 2020 and 2021. They kind of came out and said, we support Russia in this conflict. And that ended up, as you mentioned just a few slides ago, somebody doxed them, they were arrested,
yeah.
So Lockbit, they're different, right? So they haven't come out with any political allegiances. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I said that they're managing themselves amazingly, because they saw how the whole how the whole conflict is building the attention of cyber crimes and threat groups, cyber criminals and threat groups. And they just sat back and just listened, right? They just sat back and just waited for, to see what's going on. And at some point they said, we're out, we're not taking any sides. We only care about the money. It's all about good business. And that's pretty much it. So after that, especially after Conti has pretty much disappeared, you could see that Lockbit has really invested in being the #1 group. It's not just claiming victims. It's doing stuff like that, like bug bounty programs. They wanted to improve their infrastructure. They wanted to improve their product. They've launched the Lockbit 3.0. They offered to buy the TrickBot and Emotet infrastructure, which this is something that Conti used to use. So you can see that they claim this is just one example, right? But the bounty program, they already was able to pay around $50,000 to pen testers and stuff like that. So it says two things. The first is they're trying to improve themselves in a way that they can actually, they offer payment to people. And the second one is that they're not afraid of people trying to hack them, because they know that they feel very comfortable where they at. And they feel like they can pretty much do this stuff and being like unstoppable in this case.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really does show a lot of confidence in their operations, that they can run these kinds of programs and not have fear of actually getting taken down or exposed and arrested. So definitely a really interesting and concerning trend there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got to the interesting part of the new ransomware groups and recommendations. It's always nice. I wouldn't say nice. It's just for us, for the security researchers, we got to respect these people and their work, because eventually they are talented, and we try to understand them as much as we can. And it's always like pretty much exciting to see how a new group gets into the industry, like what they're bringing to the table, what they're doing differently, and if there's anything that the veteran groups can learn from. So this year we found Black Basta, Beyond Lian, and Royal. You can see the numbers of the attacks they were able to do in 2022, the number of victims they were able to claim in 2022. You can see it's not a little, right? I mean, it's not Lockbit, it's not Conti of 21, but those are pretty solid numbers, to be honest. And of course that in 2023 it continues. So if we start with Black Basta, those are a Russian threat group. They have 145 victims in only 6 months of operation, which is like pretty good. There was a claim that they are the Conti descendants, right? Because they appeared after Conti disappearance and the first disappearance, and then Conti came back, and you had Conti and Black Basta, and like no one knew who is who, and are those the Conti, or they're the original Conti or not, or stuff like that. So Conti claimed in their blog that they don't have any relations to Black Basta. They did it like in this at that point of time. This is where Conti came back, and when I said before that they didn't came back the same way they were, this is what I meant. So when they addressed this issue with Black Basta, they were talking, they were cursing and stuff like that. This is not something that they used to do. So you can see that something was changed in the management of Conti. After that, of course, they disappeared entirely. But Black Basta is still here, unfortunately, and they're here to stay, in my opinion. The second group is Beyond Lian, which is another interesting group that we have seen. They had 62 victims in five months. Like a lot of threat groups, to be honest, they try to focus most of their attention to North America, because they have the most opportunities for good payment, I guess. the thing with Lian is that they're very flexible. So you can see they're trying to ride any trends security-wise that you can see. So if, let's say, there was a trend in targeting ES6i machines, and you can see that Lian was releasing their own variant for that. But they only try to keep up with the industry, and they're doing it pretty well. And we think that Lian might be like another solid, very solid even group in the ransomware industry in the coming year or so. Royal is another interesting one because they came back, they got into the industry very late in 2022. They were claiming a lot of victims. So if you compare, let's say, Royal and Lian, you can see that Lian did 62 victims in 5 months, and Royal had almost 50 victims in only 2 months. So they were like the most likely to be Conti descendant, because they were actually started as a in a really professional manner. They actually did a lot of victims in a short period of time. So a lot of people thought that, no, this is the real Conti now, because everyone expecting them to come back, right? It's not like they're only going to be like software engineers right now. The cybercrime is too profitable for them to go in the right way. Let's put it this way. So these are the 3 groups that we have thought that are worth mentioning. Of course, there were a lot of other new groups, but those 3 are the ones that we are predicting to see more of in 2023. Okay, so again, we wanted to talk about recommendations. So when we talk about recommendations, if we're talking about recommendations that we want to apply in our own organization, there are a lot of things that we need to consider. So the first thing is we have to consider the relevant threats. So I need to understand, as an organization, who are the threats that are most likely to target me, right? So if I'm, let's say, for example, if I'm a business factory and I'm mostly having an OT infrastructure, then I should be aware of the threats that are relevant to OT infrastructure, such as Mirai botnets and stuff like that. So this is something that I need to understand. What is my threat landscape, and who is the ones that are after me, or my employees, or my infrastructure, stuff like that. External attack surface. So this is something that a lot of threat actors actually do. So if I want to target a business, an organization, I would do anything I can in the reconnaissance phase to understand what assets does the organization have, what is its failure points, what are the versions behind the infrastructure that it has, stuff like that. So I need, as an organization that want to defend myself, I need to know how my organization looks from the outside. Sensitive data. So pretty much part of the things that we do at Cyberint is exactly that. We try to understand, if we take a look at sensitive data that is being published by various sources that we have and we're monitoring, and there is always a chance that you have already been compromised, your data has already been leaked, but you have no idea about it. It might be an employee that was compromised and his credentials were leaked. It might be a misconfiguration of a cloud system that you have, which led to data leak, and you have no idea of that. So this is where we step into the picture, and we try to alert you before something bad is actually going to happen. So the sensitive data and the leaked credentials pretty much, I would say, go together. And vulnerabilities, of course, a lot of the threat groups, rather if it's ransomware, data leakage, hacktivism, APTs, of course, espionage groups, stuff like that, a lot of them are based on, a lot of them would like to exploit as much vulnerabilities as possible, especially if you're talking about front-facing services, such as RDP. We had, of course, the major campaign that we had last week, right? We had the campaign of the ES6i, when you had ES6i ARGs and possibly Nevada group targeting thousands of ES6i's exposed machines that were not patched 2 years, right? So you have to understand what are the vulnerabilities that might be relevant to your systems, And if you decide not to patch, or if you can't patch in short periods of time, that you need to understand the risks behind in cases where threat actors will exploit these vulnerabilities. And of course, brand assessed. This is pretty much something that is more, let's say, general, I guess, but a lot of brands that we cover might suffer a lot of phishing campaigns, spear phishing campaigns, stuff like that. You got to be aware of this stuff because it not just it might not just compromise your organization, but it might make some, let's say, bad reputation for your organization if clients of yours will be affected. So if you're like a retail company and you have tons of phishing campaigns that are targeting your clients, not your employees, I think it's something you will also want to know, also want to address and pretty much fight. So yeah, that's about it.
All right, thank you very much, Shmuel. We're going to move to the Q&A session now, so I'll check the chat and see if we have any questions we can answer. And for those of you who are with us, feel free to drop questions in the chat if you do have any. Okay, so here's one. There are many threat actor groups. They seem to come and go, but do they all use similar TTPs to attack their victims?
Well, pretty much, but it's not because that it's not. The thing with cybercrime, it's pretty much like any industry, right? So every competitor looks what the other, any business, looks what its competitor does. And if I see that my competitor does something new or something that was profitable to it, so I will do the same. So we could see it in let's say the ES6i. So if once one of the group have decided to compromise ES6i and it was a profitable campaign, all the others joined, right? You can see in the delivery phase when they're sending OneNotes, there is a campaign involving OneNotes documents, that malicious documents that you can send, and it's a whole procedure, but you can see that other groups are aligning to that standard also. So they're watching, and they watching us just as much as we watching them, and they reading our articles, they're reading our reports, and they're trying to look for how they can make their product better. Of course, it all comes down pretty much to the same TTPs, but there will always be this one tweak that will make one group unique, and each groups are unique, and they will all try to make it like a little bit harder, right?
All right, thank you. And so one more question here. There was in the beginning a few slides that showed there was a downward trend in ransomware over a few quarters in 2022. Is that downward trend going to continue this year? What is your best guess, if you can look into your crystal ball for us for one moment here?
Yeah, let me just I'll just get well, to be honest, I don't think it will be the same decline trend. So I think that we saw this trend, we saw this decline for several reasons. But the first one is the disappearance of Conti. We had like a major player that pretty much disappeared. And the second one is that we have seen a lot of new groups introducing themselves and emerging into this industry. So they're still building themselves, they're still establishing themselves, they're still recruiting people and building their infrastructures. And they had like 6 months pretty much to do that. And you can see that they're becoming better, they're becoming more sophisticated, they're getting more, let's say, notable victims. And currently we see this trend like continue. I mean, those groups will continue to make themselves better. Currently, Lockbit and maybe 2 or 3 other groups are the only veterans in the ransomware industry that are actually notable. And the other groups that have caught up was Black Basta and Beyond and Royal, and relatively new groups. Hive went down. You know, you also all you have right now is Lockbit and Alpha-V, which are the most notable veterans, and all of the rest are new. So as they will continue to establish themselves, making them better, recruiting more people and more talented people, this is where we're going to find that the trend is going to go up again. This is at least my guess, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like we spoke about just a few days ago, it seems to be a growing trend where some of these ransomware gangs are actively recruiting and putting up job postings, and like you mentioned on the Conti structure slide, they actually have HR teams and people who are out there like offering salaries and benefits and all sorts of crazy things. So we hope to see the trend go down, but maybe it's prudent to not be too optimistic yet. So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I don't think that the industry is going to die anytime soon, right? I mean, it took 6 months to shut down the Hive operation without any arrests. Hive was one of 50 active groups. So, I mean, it's not going anywhere, right? Might be maybe less profitable than it used to be, but it's still going to make pretty much a lot of money to a lot of people. So I think it's pretty much here to stay. I see that we have another question. Do you think RAS will shift that trend radically? I think that RAS, Ransomware as a service, to those of you who doesn't know, it's the business model of most ransomware groups. It's pretty much they work with affiliates. People find them the first access to a victim's infrastructure, and from that point on, the actual ransomware group takes the lead, and he gets like a percentage of the ransom in case it was a successful one. I think that the RAS business model that began like I think 2 years ago, I think this is what led to this industry thriving, and I don't think it will shift anything to it's pretty much an open market. So the most talented people will go with those who it's like capitalism in the cybercrime industry. So the most talented people will go with those who pay the most. You can see and you see even these days, you can see the same affiliates working with several groups, and they are going to say, okay, I have access to this. How much you pay, how much you pay, how much you pay, and you will go for the one who pays the most. So it's pretty much builds up towards the fact that the most talented will go with the most money. It will draw more talented people into the industry, and I think that this is the business model that actually made on the one hand it made the ransomware industry that successful and that big, but on the other hand, it opens the door for let's say authority operations that we had in Hive, because a lot of people claim that the FBI had an undercover in the group that actually joined because of this business model. So yeah, that's what I think.
All right, let's give it one more moment to see if any other questions come in. All right, well, I think we can wrap up. I want to say thanks again to everyone who joined us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we hope you found this content useful. If you are interested, we're holding another webinar in 2 weeks from today on February 28th, and that will cover our trends forecast, threat trends forecast for 2023. So please keep an eye out for that if you're interested, and we'd love to see you there as well. And so thank you all again. Shmuel, thank you for presenting. This has been fantastic. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night or evening. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.